Tick, Tick, Boom is a 2021 American biographical musical comedy drama film directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda in his feature directorial debut. Written by Stephen Levinson, who also serves as an executive producer, it is based on the stage musical of the same name by Jonathan Larson, a semi-autobiographical story about Larson writing a musical to enter into the theater industry. The film stars Andrew Garfield as Larson, alongside Robin DeJesus, Alexandra Shipp, Joshua Henry, Judith Light, and Vanessa Hudgens. Tick, Tick, Boom had its world premiere at the AFI Fest on November 10, 2021, and began a limited theatrical release 2 days later, before streaming on Netflix on November 19. The film received positive reviews for Garfield's performance and Miranda's direction. It was named one of the best films of 2021 by the American Film Institute, and was nominated for Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy at the 79th Golden Globe Awards, and Best Picture at the 27th Critics' Choice Awards. For his performance, Garfield earned numerous awards, including the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor Motion Picture Musical or Comedy, as well as a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Actor. Plot. In 1992, Jonathan Larson performs his rock monologue Tick, Tick, Boom at New York Theater Workshop, accompanied by friends Roger and Caressa. He describes an incessant ticking noise he hears in his head and begins to tell his story. An unseen narrator explains the film is the true story of Larson, except for the parts Jonathan made up. In early 1990, Jonathan juggles work at the Moondance Diner in Soho with preparing for a workshop of his musical and passion project Superbia. He feels pressure to be successful before he turns 30, with his birthday just over a week away. He sees the workshop as his last chance. He has a party at home with friends, including his former roommate Michael, his girlfriend Susan, and fellow waiters Freddie and Carolyn. Susan tells Jonathan about a teaching job at Jacob's Pillow and asks him to come. Michael, who previously left theater for a lucrative advertising career, sees Susan's offer as an opportunity for Jonathan to consider a serious future, and invites Jonathan to join an advertising focus group at his company. Jonathan's producer Ira asks him to write a new song for Superbia because the story needs it. This troubles him, as his idol Stephen Sondheim told him the same at a composing workshop some years ago, but he can't come up with anything and he only has a week. Jonathan finds himself unable to concentrate on preparing for the workshop as he thinks about Michael and Susan's offers. His anxieties are only compounded when he learns from Carolyn that Freddie, who is HIV positive, has been hospitalized. Susan, frustrated by Jonathan's indecisiveness and obsession with his career, breaks up with him. To get money to hire a full band for the workshop, Jonathan attends the advertising focus group. However, he deliberately sabotages it, angering Michael, who feels Jonathan is wasting the privilege to have a life with the person he loves on a financially unstable theater career, something Michael cannot do as a gay man in the AIDS crisis. After receiving an encouraging call from his agent Rosa, Jonathan tries to write the new song the night before the workshop but his power gets cut off. He heads to a swimming pool to vent his frustrations over the workshop and his personal life, before finally coming up with the new song. At the workshop are friends, family, and industry professionals, including Sondheim. Jonathan receives praise but no offers to produce Superbia. Discouraged, Jonathan begs Michael for a corporate job, but Michael, having changed his mind after seeing the workshop, urges Jonathan to continue in musical theater, revealing he is HIV positive. Realizing that his career obsession has cost him Susan and harmed his friendship with Michael, Jonathan wanders through New York before finding himself at the Delacorte Theater. He finds a piano and reflects on his friendship with Michael and the sacrifices he must make for his career. He and Michael reconcile. On the morning of Jonathan's 30th birthday, Sondheim calls, congratulating him and wanting to talk more about Superbia, lifting his spirits. Holding his birthday party at the Moondance Diner, he is relieved to hear Freddie is to be discharged from the hospital. Susan gifts him blank sheet music paper to help in his career and they part on amicable terms. She narrates that his next project was Tick, Tick, Boom, before he returned to working on a previous project, which became Rent. She reveals he died of a sudden aortic aneurysm the night before Rent began previews off-Broadway. He never experienced the success he desired, but his work lives on. In 1992, Jonathan performs the final song from Tick, Tick, Boom, as he optimistically looks to the future. Cast. Cameos. New York Theatre Workshop artistic director James C. Nicola and Roger Bart make credited appearances as featured diners at the Moondance Diner in the background of the opening scene. Both knew and worked with the real Larson. Nicola was in charge of New York Theatre Workshop at the time of the film's events and helped program Rent, while Bart was a close friend and frequent collaborator who contributed backing vocals to the original rock monologue version of Tick, Tick, Boom. The character Roger, played by Joshua Henry, is loosely inspired by Bart. Sunday features cameos from André DeShields, Bebe Neuwirth, Beth Malone, Brian Stokes Mitchell, Chita Rivera, Chuck Cooper, Howard McGillen, Joel Grey, Renee Elise Goldsberry, Philippa Sue, Felicia Rashad, and Bernadette Peters. It also prominently features Adam Pascal, Daphne Rubin Vega, and Wilson Germain Heredia as homeless bums. All three were original cast members of the Broadway production of Rent, which was also written by Larson. Rubin Vega's costume includes a pair of shoes she wore on stage in the original production of Rent, and a black hoodie which once belonged to Larson. Director Miranda also cameos as a cook at the Moondance Diner during the scene. The musical theater workshop scene includes cameos by various established theater composers and lyricists as aspiring composers and lyricists, including Alex Lacamoire, Amanda Green, Chad Begulin, Jamie Lozano, Dave Malloy, Esau Davis, Georgia Stitt, Grace McLean, Helen Park, Jason Robert Brown, Janine Tesery, Joe Iconis, Mark Shyman, Matthew Sklar, Nick Blameyer, Quiera Alegria Huds, Shayna Taub, Stephen Schwartz, Stephen Trask, screenwriter Stephen Levinson, and Tom Kitt. Blameyer previously portrayed Jonathan Larson in the 2016 off-Broadway revival of Tick, Tick, Boom. Green, Begulin, Malloy, Iconis, Sklar, and Taub are all previous recipients of the Jonathan Larson Grant for Aspiring Composers. Several members of Miranda's hip-hop improv group Freestyle Love Supreme have roles throughout the film. Besides Annie Essa Folds and Utkarsh Ambedkar, Shockwave, and Andrew Jelly Donut Bancroft appear in No More, and Christopher Jackson appears as a patron at the New York Theatre Workshop performance of Tick, Tick, Boom. Miranda's father Louis A. Miranda Jr. cameos as a building concierge in No More. Additionally, Janet Dacow, Kenita Miller, Eddie Lee and Jared Lofton appear as performers in the Superbia workshop. Although Whitford portrays Sondheim on screen, Sondheim voices himself when he leaves a message on Jonathan's voicemail, as he does in the original musical. Miranda's wife Vanessa Nadal voices Deborah, Susan's friend who calls Jonathan towards the beginning of the film about equipment for Susan's dance show. Anna Luzos, who designed the set for the 2001 off-Broadway run of Tick, Tick, Boom, and her wife Robin Goodman, who co-produced the run and was friends with the real Larson, play Michelle and Gay respectively, Jonathan's neighbors who attend his party. Among the audience members in the final scene are Scott Schwartz, the director of the 2001 off-Broadway production of Tick, Tick, Boom, and Julie Larson, Larson's sister. Anthony Rapp, Edina Menzel, and Freddie Walker Brown appear via archive footage of the original production of Rent. Archival footage of the Japanese and Cuban productions are also used, the latter sourced from the 2019 documentary Revolution Rent. A prop playbill for the workshop mentions Jace Alexander, Michael Lindsay, and Marin Mazzi as members of the cast. All three knew and worked with the real Larson, Alexander through the Naked Angels, Lindsay from their days at Adelphi University and at several Superbia workshops, and Mazzi as a Superbia cast member and collaborator on her and Larson's cabaret act J. Glitz. It is not clear, however, if any of the performers in the on-screen workshop are actually meant to be these actors. Production. Background. Tick, Tick, Boom began as a rock monologue titled 30/90ths and later boho days that Larson wrote between 1989 and 1990 and first performed at Second Stage Theatre from September 6-9, 1990. Boho Days was a semi-autobiographical work following a musical theatre composer named John who tries to figure out his next project after a failed workshop of his musical Superbia, based on Larson's own experience in trying to get Superbia staged. Larson later rewrote it into Tick, Tick, Boom, which he performed at the Village Gate in November 1991, and later at New York Theatre Workshops o Solo Mio festivals in 1992 and 1993 before turning his attention to Rent. The piece changed significantly in this period, as it was written in response to events in Larson's life. The character of Susan notably changed with each iteration based on Larson's relationship with his real girlfriend Janet Charleston. Larson's friend and producer Victoria Leacock Hoffman recalled the work became increasingly pessimistic with Larson's increasing frustrations with his career. Following Larson's death, Leacock Hoffman and Robin Goodman recruited playwright David Auburn to transform the solo piece into a three-person musical. Auburn reworked both the story and structure of Tick, Tick, Boom, while still attempting to preserve Larson's writing. Besides the addition of dialogue, one of Auburn's most significant contributions was the Superbia workshop plot. This change, besides giving a sense of plot progression, also provided the opportunity to include the previously unreleased song Come to Your Senses, which was originally written for Superbia. J. Collis, the author of the oral history Boho Days, the wider works of Jonathan Larson, describes Auburn's changes as giving the musical a better dramaturgical structure, changing the show from a story about the artist's struggle, something which Larson's mentor Sondheim criticized the original rock monologue for being, feeling such a story was overdone, to one about making adult choices and dealing with the consequences. This production ran off-Broadway at the Jane Street Theatre in 2001 and is arguably the version most familiar to audiences. Development. Producer Julie O was first inspired to bring Tick, Tick, Boom to the screen after seeing Lin-Manuel Miranda star in the 2014 production at New York City Center as part of Encores. After viewing a New York Times article by Miranda about how Tick, Tick, Boom inspired him when he saw the off-Broadway production in 2001, she felt it was important for the story to become a film. O felt the only director who would be able to do so was Miranda, who immediately expressed interest after she reached out to him. O and Miranda began formal discussions about the film while he was in London filming Mary Poppins Returns. The film was announced in July 2018 with the news that Miranda would make his directorial debut with the musical adaptation, with Imagine Entertainment and Julie O producing and Dear Evan Hansen's Stephen Levinson penning the script. Miranda, Levinson, and O treated the process like creating a musical, including holding a secret workshop at the United Palace in Washington Heights on July 16, 2018. It was during this stage that Andrew Garfield joined the process, having finished his run in the Broadway revival of Angels in America the day before. The team set a production start date of March 2020, in order to give Miranda and Levinson time to conduct research, and for Garfield to take formal vocal and piano training. By June 2019, Netflix had acquired the film, with Andrew Garfield the top choice to star. In January 2020, it was also announced that choreographer Ryan Heffington would be working on the film. Writing. In order to adapt the musical for film, Miranda and Levinson conducted a significant amount of their own research. This included interviews with friends, family, and colleagues such as Charleston, Roger Bart, Matt O'Grady, and Ira Weitzman, the latter of whom became a character in the film as a direct result of these conversations. Larson's sister Julie, who was a producer on the film, discouraged Miranda and Levinson from sanitizing Larson's image, telling them to get all the warts. Get all of that good stuff. Bart recalled that Larson had a tendency to lash out when his work was not being received the way he wanted, but he was generous to his collaborators once in the rehearsal room. This insight heavily influenced Larson's portrayal in the finished film. Miranda and Levinson also accessed the Jonathan Larson papers at the Library of Congress, in which the original scripts and demo tapes for Superbia, 30/90ths, Boho Days, and Tick, Tick, Boom exist. Scenes from these scripts were used to create new scenes for the film. For example, a section where Larson recalled receiving feedback from a man named Robert Reimer at a musical theater workshop was adapted for the film, with Reimer replaced by the man's real name, Stephen Sondheim. In one early draft, Larson wrote that Susan's green dress was a commission made by a fashion designer/fellow waiter at the Moondance Diner named Carolyn. This led to the creation of the character Carolyn, played by Michaela J. Rodriguez, for the film. The screenplay features a framing device loosely inspired by the Auburn script of Larson performing the monologue with two other performers, in this case Roger and Caressa, the former of whom is inspired by Roger Bart's role as background vocalist. For performances of Boho Days and Tick, Tick, Boom. As a result of this device, certain songs that are sung in the Auburn script by characters in the narrative are instead sung by Jonathan, Roger, and Caressa, interwoven with the drama on screen. According to Levinson, Larson is telling the story to an audience, with most of the film taking place within his mind. Come to Your Senses is an example of a song that changed because of this device. In the 2001 production it was performed by the actress who plays both Susan and Caressa, while in the film it was turned into a duet between Caressa and Susan for dramatic purposes. 2 songs present in the 2001 Auburn script were cut during the writing process: Sugar, which Jonathan and Caressa sing while bonding over their love of Twinkies, and See Her Smile, a song sung by Jonathan about his relationship with Susan. However, Jonathan sings a riff of Sugar to Ira Weitzman at one point in the finished film. A third song, Green Green Dress, was filmed but cut during post-production. The finished sequence was uploaded to Netflix's YouTube channel. Miranda and Levinson also added 3 songs that were in previous versions of Tick, Tick, Boom, but not included in the Auburn script: Boho Days, Play Game, and Swimming. In the latter's case, the song had been cut by Larson himself after the show's 1990 performances and had not been heard by the public in 30 years. Boho Days was the original opening number of Boho Days and was previously only available as a bonus track on the 2001 off-Broadway cast recording, extracted from a demo tape recorded by Larson himself. Like Auburn had in 2001 by including Come to Your Senses, Miranda and Levinson used the film as an opportunity to release more of the Superbia soundtrack, specifically a song titled Sextet, as the lyrics "Everyone Will Be There" thematically fit with Larson's anxieties about the workshop. Casting. Garfield was confirmed to star in October, with Alexandra Shipp, Vanessa Hudgens, and Robin DeJesus joining in November 2019. Joshua Henry, Judith Light, and Bradley Whitford would join in January 2020. Jordan Fisher, who had starred in Rent, Live, was meant to appear in the film as a character named Simon, but due to the film's delays his wedding was scheduled on the same day his scene was to be shot, so he was replaced by Noah Robbins. However, the scene was ultimately cut from the film. Fisher's name had been listed on the film's casting announcements, and press reports continued to list both him and Robbins as members of the cast even after the film's release. In preparation for his role as Sondheim, Whitford studied interviews with him from around the time the film takes place. He noted his performance is somewhat dialed back, as he described Sondheim as almost an orangutan in his physicality in interviews. To simplify his performance, he would think crooked smile on an unmade bed before cameras started rolling, which he felt was the key element of physicality he needed. Filming. Principal photography began in March 2020, however, the production only filmed for 8 days before the COVID-19 pandemic forced a shutdown, with the last day of filming taking place on March 12, 2020 outside of Larson's real apartment at 508 Greenwich Street. During the hiatus, the cast, crew, and producers held weekly meetings on Zoom, which were colloquially referred to as TIC Zooms. Production resumed in September 2020 under strict COVID protocols, and wrapped in November 2020. The singing in the finished film is a mix of actors lip-syncing to pre-recorded tracks, re-recording their vocals in post-production, and singing live on set, with the choice to use one or the others dependent on the environment and tone of the scene. In the case of Y, Garfield felt the emotions in the pre-recorded playback track were insufficient, and so sang the song live during filming at the Delacorte Theatre in March. This flexibility had to be limited after production resumed under COVID protocols, with the team limiting live singing to only certain moments. Miranda recalled one incident where Garfield spontaneously sang live on an impulse during one of the first days of shooting under the new protocols, leading Miranda to be scolded by the film's COVID compliance monitor. Boho Days was one of the few musical numbers filmed with live singing during this period. All of the actors in the scene had to quarantine for 14 days in order to film it. The film includes a number of references, both visual and auditory, to Larson's later work Rent. Besides Pascal, Ruben Vega, and Heredia's cameos, Jonathan calls Michael Pookie in several scenes. The Cat Scratch Club appears in the background of Play Game, and Jonathan plays one song Glory on his keyboard at one point. The team had hoped to include more locations associated with Rent, such as Tompkins Square Park and the Life Cafe in the East Village, but COVID restrictions resulted in most of these scenes being moved to the diner. The film's Superbia workshop montage consists of footage of the actors lip-syncing to a playlist compiled by Miranda, including songs from American Idiot and Hair. The last song on the playlist was Seasons of Love. During filming in late 2020, rumors leaked that Garfield was to make a return appearance as Peter Parker in the then unnamed upcoming Spider-Man film. Miranda approached Garfield on set to ask if he was in it, to which Garfield gave an unconvincing denial. Miranda walked away from the conversation thinking Garfield would need to get better at lying. Garfield later became well known for his repeated denials that he was in Spider-Man: No Way Home during the press tour for Tick, Boom. Set and visual design. Musical sequences. Post-production. Andrew Weisblum served as the initial editor of the film up to the first development screening. Due to the film's COVID delays, he had to leave for a Darren Aronofsky project and was replaced by Myron Kirstein. Miranda's original assembly cut ran 2 hours and 20 minutes, whereas he preferred the film to run less than 2 hours. The film originally opened with a sequence focusing on Jonathan pacing anxiously backstage before the Tick, Boom performance. This was mostly cut because it was decided the opening of the film needed to be about who Larson was, rather than the character Jonathan's anxieties. Footage from this deleted opening is present in the film's initial teaser trailer. The first scene at the diner during 30/90ths was originally a different scene with Michael and Jonathan packing up Michael's things at their apartment. During preparation for reshoots, Kirstine pitched the scene at the diners so the sequence could introduce the characters of Freddie and Carolyn, minimizing time needed later in the film. He was alarmed when Levinson and Miranda shot a 4-page scene in response, though he was relieved to learn they were open to cutting dialogue if needed. A question that arose during post-production was how to address the real Jonathan Larson's death. David Auburn had intentionally avoided doing so for the 2001 production, feeling that such a move would cheapen the effect of the story on stage. He had even gone so far as to remove lines Larson wrote about feeling like his heart would explode, as he felt it would serve to distract audience members whom he assumed knew the circumstances of Larson's death. However, Miranda, Weisblum, and Kirstine realized that, with the passage of time, there were more audience members unfamiliar with Larson who would need to get on the same page as the filmmakers about his ticking clock. Likewise, they would need the context of not just Larson's death, but his legacy through his most well-known show, Rent. Miranda did not want this information conveyed through on-screen text at the end, despite Kirstine joking this is traditional with even critically acclaimed biopics. Miranda argued such a method was too obvious, and that the information needed to be incorporated into the film in a natural way. The team eventually settled on documentary-style bookends that combine narration, archival footage, and recreated Betacam footage, which Kirstine described as bringing the film full circle and thus allowing the information to be an effective part of the film's storytelling. Sondheim's vocal cameo came about when he asked to rewrite his voicemail message after viewing the film, as he felt he would not say what had originally been written. However, at this point in production Whitford was not available to re-record the line, so Sondheim offered to record it himself. The cameo was Sondheim's last film appearance before his death on November 26, 2021. Green dress. Historical accuracy. The original Tick, Tick, Boom, Rock monologue is a semi-autobiographical work. It derives from Larson's life, but the events described are partially fictionalized. While the film affirms the John character as Jonathan Larson and includes significant additional research done by Levinson and Miranda, the script alludes to the fact that there are parts of the story that Jonathan made up. Stephen Sondheim was actually Larson's mentor for some time prior to the Superbia presentation. Their correspondence began when Larson sent Sondheim a letter in college and Sondheim responded. Sondheim had even invited Larson to observe rehearsals for the original Broadway production of Into the Woods in 1987. Matt O'Grady, the inspiration for Michael, was never actually Larson's roommate and was never involved in the performing arts even as they were growing up. The musical theater workshop scenes are based on Larson's presentations of material from Superbia from 1985 to 1986, at the ASCAP Foundation Musical Theater Workshop in November and December 1985 and at the Dramatists Guild in April 1986. Sondheim was a panelist for the ASCAP Workshop alongside Peter Stone, Tony Tanner, Nancy Ford, and Charles Strauss. The panel at the Dramatists Guild performance included Sondheim, Stone, John Kander, Martin Charnin, and Stephen Schwartz, who cameos as an aspiring composer in the scene from the film based on these panels. According to the 2018 Oral History Boho Days, the wider works of Jonathan Larson, Sondheim was one of the few panelists across the presentations who consistently praised Superbia. Walter Bloom, played by Richard Kind, appears to be the film's stand-in for the negative feedback Larson received during this period. The Superbia Playwrights Horizons Workshop, produced by Ira Weitzman and directed by R.J. Cutler, actually took place on December 19, 1988. Larson's disappointment in the workshop went beyond a lack of offers for production, rather than the rock band or even the synthesizer he wanted. the workshop only had standard piano accompaniment, and the musical theater-trained cast had difficulty with the energy of Larsen's rock score. Though Sondheim did come to support his pupil, he left after the first act. The film implies Larsen stopped developing Superbia after the failed playwright's Horizons presentation. He actually continued work on it for some years afterwards, including a screenplay adaptation in 1990 and a reading at the Public Theatre in 1991. He had ceased further development on it by the 1992 NYTW staging of Tick, Tick, Boom, due to focusing on Rent. Janet Charleston, the inspiration for Susan, did not fully break up with Larsen. Rather, the character's actions and motivations over the course of the original monologue's development were based on changes in the pair's on-again, off-again relationship. In fact, the two were still together at the time of Larsen's death. Music. The Tick, Tick, Boom soundtrack was released for streaming/digital on November 12, 2021, by Masterworks Broadway on the same day as the film's theatrical release. A physical CD is scheduled for release on December 3, 2021. All Jonathan Larson songs in the film were produced by Alex Lacamoire, Bill Sherman, and Kurt Crowley. The songs were mixed by Greg Wells, and music supervised by Stephen Gizicki. 30/90 was released via streaming on October 5, 2021. Louder Than Words was also released as a single along with the album's pre-order date on October 22, 2021. Levinson and Miranda felt it was important for the film to play with the credit score by Jonathan Larson and so sourced many songs from the Library of Congress archives, including several that had never received an official release. This includes 3 songs from Superbia not included in the soundtrack: Ever After, LCD Redoubt, and Sextet. Kurt Crowley released a solo arrangement of the latter featuring Joshua Henry during the COVID-induced break in the film's production. After considerable fan demand, the newly titled Sextet montage was released as a single on February 4, 2022 in honor of what would have been Larson's 62nd birthday. A song called Debtor Club underscores the scene of Jonathan inviting various industry professionals to his reading. This was a song originally written for Boho Days, described as a Tears for Fears-esque track which was replaced with No More. The film also includes 3 stand-alone songs by Larson: Rhapsody, which plays in the background of Susan's dance recital and over the film's credits, Out of My Dreams covered by Veronica Vasquez, which can be heard when Jonathan meets Susan on the roof, and It Only Takes a Few, covered by the Mountain Goats, which plays over the credits. Of these, only Out of My Dreams and It Only Takes a Few were released on the film's soundtrack. Additionally, a rejected CNN jingle that Larson wrote plays in the background of Jonathan and Michael's car ride. The cut song Sugar is referenced when Jonathan sings a riff from it to Ira Weitzman. As an Easter egg, Jonathan plays the opening melody of one song Glory from Rent at one point in the film. Release. On June 10, 2021, the first trailer for the film was released online, confirming that the film would be released on Netflix and in select theaters in late 2021. It had its Los Angeles premiere at AFI Fest on November 10, 2021, as the festival's opening night film, and its New York premiere at the Schoenfeld Theater. It was released in a limited release on November 12, 2021, prior to its streaming release on Netflix on November 19, 2021. Reception. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 87% based on 213 reviews, with an average rating of 7.6/10. The website's critical consensus reads, Tick, Tick, Boom makes musical magic out of a story focused on the creative process, an impressive feat for debuting director Lin-Manuel Miranda. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 74 out of 100, based on 44 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. The film was universally praised for its adaptation of the original musical, with Vulture's Jackson McHenry highlighting the expanded cast and depiction of the world of the show. Garfield and DeJesus's performances were particularly praised, due to Garfield's surprising musical ability and DeJesus's starring turn in a film after largely working in theater. Jessica Dershowitz of Entertainment Weekly dubbed the film a totem for the thrills and trials of making art, with all the sacrifices and empathy it requires, also praising it as a tribute to Larson. Miranda's directing debut was also praised, particularly due to the challenge of adapting the material. Variety's Peter DeBrugge noted that despite Miranda's own personal connection to Larson's story, his direction seemed devoid of ego and purely focused on centering Larson. The film's choice to contextualize Larson's career and legacy through the documentary-style bookends was criticized even by positive reviewers. McHenry noted it reduced Larson to his most successful work and the film was stronger when the character was telling his story. McHenry also noted that like Rent, Tick, Tick, Boom views the AIDS crisis from the perspective of a straight male who did not contract the disease, and though the film adaptation expands its view on the crisis, the gesture feels incomplete. Audience response. Julia Dilbel, writing for ComingZone.net, observed that in a year of musical movie releases that saw films such as In the Heights, Dear Evan Hansen, and West Side Story, Tick, Tick, Boom, stood out for generating considerable buzz, whereas the other films struggled at the box office. She suggested the continued effect of the pandemic on movie theater attendance was to blame, noting the popularity of Miranda's Encanto following its release on Disney and after underperforming at the box office, with Tick, Tick, Boom's status as a streaming release making it more easily accessible to its audience.